Looking at those 16 to 24s, young people do admit to being influenced by online advertising, and it seems the older we get, the more cynical we get, because those stats seem to drop off, especially the over 45s there, only 16% saying they're influenced by online marketing. So consumers are becoming numb to our online tactics, which in my mind means that brands need to find new ways to have touch points and new ways to be a part of that decision journey and not just kind of relying on the upfront ads to drive it. And in my mind, building relationships is what will win. I think in the day and age we live in now, with the rise of social media to the point that it is, people feel like they have more contact with brands than they ever have done before. We see behind the scenes so much more. We understand brands' values more than we ever have done before. So actually what we're looking for as consumers is relationships. And we want to have shared experiences with those brands and realize something where we actually are coming together and have shared enjoyment with the brands that we're interested in. So what do I actually mean by gamification? Let's go right back to the start here. So it's the borrowing of elements of gameplay and applying them in a traditionally non-game context. And what we're trying to do is recreate those same levels of attention and engagement in the human brain that would occur when we're in a state of play. So gamification is used in so many ways now, all the way through to like your Apple Watch or your Fitbit, and the fact that you're kind of in competition with your friends and you're gamified to doing things like that. Anything like that is a form of gamification. But what I'm looking at today is how we use it in marketing strategies to create small kind of online games to engage users and so on, and you'll see. So our research found that consumers that have already experienced gamification are overwhelmingly open to it. So 93% of those that had already experienced it said that they thought it was engaging. And they also admitted that it influences their behavior, with 60% of consumers saying that they would be more likely to buy from a brand if they enjoyed playing a game with that brand. So that's really high, encouraging stats, especially when we think back to 58% of people saying that they didn't even want to see the ads and don't think they have an influence on them. And that stat rose to 86% for those that had experienced gamification before. And that's why we believe that this is the antidote to consumer apathy, which was kind of the title of the research paper that we did. So we've all seen a conversion funnel before, and this is my take on a conversion funnel though, because actually that very first stage, what we're looking for is friendship. We're trying to build a friendship with our audience as a brand and trying to find some shared values. And actually friendship is a perfect stage for gamification. It's a reason that someone might find your brand, they might see something on social media, and then that might be the first interaction that you have. The next stage in the funnel, once you've become friends, is that kind of offering advice and support, and that building up a picture and seeing that that consumer can trust you as a brand and can buy into what it is that you sell or the services that you offer. And gamification fits in perfectly here as well, because you can use gamification to educate on whether it's what you stand for or your sector. We try not to ever advise to use it as a way to educate on your products from a sales point of view. That might work actually for onboarding a customer, but not in a marketing journey, because we don't want to be overly salesy, because we'll turn people off. Now, sealing the deal. We should never have a game at the point that we're trying to seal the deal, because that will just distract people. And at that point, if we've got them that far down the funnel, we want them to move on. But then the keeping in touch stage, again, it's perfect. So often the email marketing and social media posts that I see from brands are just sales related or product related. If I see something engaging like a game that a brand's sharing or some kind of quiz, I'm going to be more likely to engage with that. So it's perfect for keeping in touch. And then for the advocacy part of it, the telling their friends about you, it's perfect. Our games have really spun off into WhatsApp groups where people are trying to figure them out together, or social media groups. We've had, well, you'll see with one of my case studies, we've had wives messaging saying their husband can't sleep because of the game before. It's a great way to get people talking about your brand and sharing your brand story on a topic that's really fun and engaging. So why gamify? So consumers are more emotional than rational, and it's a fact, and there's more and more neuroscience to prove this now. A great quote here. So we live in a world where we are taught that we are thinking creatures that feel, but actually we're feeling creatures that think. So the feeling and the emotion comes first. Most decisions we make, although we like to believe that we're logical and rational and we've thought about them, are actually made internally, unconsciously, just by our emotions before we even get to the rational part. We tend to backfill that. It's normally when someone says, oh, why did you choose that? You actually, at that point, your brain goes, oh, and you pass out a reason at that point. So emotion is really important. So if we can emotionally engage and have fun with our audience, then that's only a good thing. It's an untapped opportunity. So the survey that we did, only 31% of respondents had actually experienced gamification before. So it's a huge opportunity. Lots of people, and we made sure that they understood what we meant by gamification, and only 16% of them had experienced it more than once. And remember the stat from earlier, 86% said that they'd be more likely to buy from a brand if they enjoyed playing a game with that brand. So there's huge kind of, if you're going to get them engaged, the chances of then turning them into a customer is a really strong signal there. Young people, as I said before, were the biggest opportunity, and these are just some stats around from that kind of 16 to 24 age group. So 91% would be open to playing games with brands, 84% would buy from a brand they enjoyed playing a game with, and 61% said that they'd be likely to keep buying from that brand. So anyone here that's got a young audience, it's a really, really awesome thing to consider, especially for that audience. They also ranked online games as the most memorable branded activity. So they actually put it ahead of traditional advertising, live games, and even live experiences. So this really is a future customer, the idea of creating something online. And as you'll see as we go through, there's real longevity to gamification. So whereas running a live game or a live experience, once you've spent the money, it's gone, and you hope you've had the impact, gamification's got that long-term ability for you. So it's actually a good use of budget in that sense. Now, these stats might be slightly interesting for some people, because stereotypically we might expect that men would be more engaged and more open to branded games. But actually women came out on top, 76% and 62% for men. So if you've got a female-heavy audience, then don't be put off by those stereotypes. That's definitely, they're definitely open to online games. Let me take you right back to the start, though. I alluded at the very beginning of my talk that this kind of came from a test campaign that we did. So I'm going to tell you about that test campaign now and how we got to where we are today. So in August 2017, so rolling back 2 years, we launched Find 50 Clubs. This, if anyone wants to go and play it, don't play it now because I will definitely lose your attention. This is the URL that you can go and find that game at. It's still live now. And this is what the game looked like. So there was a landing page, obviously, first, and then when you got into the game, it's just a scene, and hidden in that scene are 50 clues to football clubs, ranging mainly from UK football clubs. There's a few European ones thrown in there, a few lower leagues as well to make it more difficult. But it's basically a catchphrase style game. So for example, down here we've got a swimming pool with black water in it. So it was Blackpool. So some are as easy as that, and some literally have you pulling your hair out trying to find them. But the engagement on this was huge. I mean, so average time on the page was 12 minutes, which is quite a long time to hold people's attention as an average. But 15% of people spent more than 40 minutes staring at that one page. People were addicted. And that kind of was all bought into the idea behind it. To get into the game, you don't have to sign up, you don't give any details. But once you're in, and you think, oh, I need to go to a meeting, or it's the end of the day, I need to go home, you want to save your progress, and you're quite happy at that point to hand over your details. So we haven't upfront forced anyone to do anything they don't want to, but at the point that they're like, I love this game, I don't want to lose my progress, they're happy to create an account, save their details, and give us consent to hopefully contact them, is kind of the marketing spin on it. It wasn't really our spin, we were just kind of testing it out. So that's the scene. I'm sure some of you might have got some of the answers while I left it on screen there. Whenever I put this up in a client meeting, I always lose them, so I have to move on quite quickly. So how do we get the interest? So us as an agency, we're a really good agency, but we don't have a huge audience. You wouldn't expect many agencies to have huge audiences. We're not a B2C brand with a huge social following. So we really had to think about how to launch it. So we used our outreach skills from our SEO and PR teams to think about how we're going to get this out there. So we'd picked the right time of year. It was just coming up to the Premiership starting, so everyone was kind of back on the football bandwagon. By the way, I'm not a big football fan, so the team helped me with knowing what we were doing here. But getting ready for the season is key. Everyone's talking about football. So we reached out, we kind of worked on a list of journalists that were key journalists interested in sport, interested in football. Potentially, we tried to find ones that had shared games, things like that before, to give us a bit more of an indication they'd be interested. And we reached out to them with this as a graphic, so a covering email, and this is a graphic, so that they could see just the top section. And we used their language, so it's all kicking off soon. Congratulations, you've impressed the scouts and made the Find 50 football club trials. So we're using their language to get them to buy into it. And we told them that there was 9 football clubs hidden in the area above. Get stuck in, see what they could do. The engagement was amazing. These were journalists that actually we hadn't really necessarily got a relationship with or spoken to before, but they were interested. We actually got a Sport Bible. They were like, can we help you launch this? Can we be the first to put this out there? Which was awesome. And then we used social media, so we used Twitter. It's a really good way. Anyone that's not really tried to speak to journalists before, Twitter is the perfect place, firstly to find them, and secondly to have conversations with them. And again, we were using their language. I'd like to email you about this we're launching. Warning, it's possibly more addictive than Football Manager, so we're trying to get them excited about it. We then also used things like Facebook as well to make contact, and all of it was kind of themed and all of it to get their buy-in. By getting Sport Bible on board, and I think we got, I think it was Sport Bible gave us a quote to use on the landing page, which was ideal, but I feel like we also got some others ahead of the proper launch, which meant we already had some kind of brand buy-in to help us. We put a BuzzFeed game up a couple of days before as well, so we just took 10 of the clues, turned it into a BuzzFeed game and used that to try and build some momentum. And then we had a series of kind of launch clues coming out on social media over the days leading up to it. I will add on social media, I think we only spent £100 on Facebook ads to help get a bit of amplification. These were some of the sites that covered it. So Sport Bible was a really big one, Planet Football, Who Ate All the Pies. Those 3 sites still send us traffic today, 2 years later. Like every single day, we still get traffic on this. Betfair loved it so much, they literally made contact with us and they were like, we need to talk to you, we want to do some of these games. So we've since launched about 6 games for them in a similar style. We got shortlisted for a Football Business Award, which was crazy because we were up against like Sky for like a brand activation piece, and there's little us with our game that we'd created that was kind of just an idea that came out of a team brainstorm. And we also we were shortlisted for a UK Search Award for an outreach campaign. These were the stats. So these are the stats after 5 weeks. So these are the first 5 weeks. So bearing in mind, we definitely have not got anywhere near this kind of audience to already speak to. We were from a standing start from a football point of view, really. And we reached over 54,000 unique people in that 5 weeks. Over 5,000 of them created accounts. That was over 10% of them were giving us their data and signing up and saying, you can talk to me again. It really was that hard. Only 3.4% of those had actually completed it. We'd gone worldwide, 159 countries. And then our social engagement was just huge. And I think that's probably my next slide, maybe. I've got some of the social. No, this was in the first 2 months then. So once we've then gone on another 3 weeks, we're up to 100,000, and to date we're more than 140,000. So the link side of it, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. One of our big passions in the agency is SEO, and this is a great tool for SEO, and I'll talk about it from a link building point of view a bit later on and why that's important. But a huge amount of links, huge amount of sign-ups to emails. It was more than we ever really expected. We thought it was just going to be this little bit of fun we'd put out for the football starting. What made it so good? So it was the right demographic. Now that is important. Football fans do love quizzes. They love competing. They love sharing knowledge and trying to be smarter than their friends. So it was the right demographic. It was addictive. So by having 50, once you were 10 in, there's no way you're giving up until you've attempted your best to get to 50, because some people did give up. But it was addictive in that people wanted to keep going. And you kind of think, well, I've got to be able to get this. It's only pictures. Come on, I can do this. So people wanted to carry on. It was challenging. So some of them were quite easy and you'd feel like you get on a roll, and then suddenly you'd be like, I'm out of ones I can get. This is really difficult. And it's quite a good game then to start playing out loud, talking to friends. It's one of those ones where you start saying the words of what you can see, and suddenly the penny drops and you're like, oh, that's what it is, because you kind of have to hear the words sometimes. The length of games, so that was a really good part of it. It meant that people wanted to save their details and progress. If it's a game that lasts just 10, 20 seconds or something and you're done, you're not necessarily going to engage unless there's a really amazing prize at the end of it. You're not going to put your details in. The outreach strategy, so you'd hope we'd be good at that, and luckily we were. So the outreach strategy really helped. We'd really thought about how we were going to get it to the right people that were going to help us amplify it into the market. There was not a whiff of a sales message, and that was really easy for us because this was just kind of a test campaign, and we don't do anything to do with football other than work with some football clubs, and there was nothing for us to sell from this. We did actually obviously end up selling some games from it, which was nice, but that wasn't the intention, and I think that is a really important message. Gamification is about having fun, it's not the sales side of it. We created a community effect. So one of my favorite things was that over especially that first week where the traffic was really, really building, we hadn't really thought about how big the social was going to go, because we mainly B2B with a lot of our customers. We do B2C, but we don't really manage any big social where you get loads of engagement. And we were kind of like, whoa, this is like, we're going to have to all be like on our laptops tonight with dinner, keeping an eye on conversations and helping out. And it would be like 10 o'clock at night and my phone would ping and someone would have sent another tweet. And before I got a chance to respond, someone that I had no idea who they were was helping that person out. But they were also helping them out in the same style that I would have done or the team would have done. They were kind of saying, oh, so you're looking for a clue? Well, think about this, rather than telling them the answer. And it had just created this community of people that are helping each other and had kind of picked up our own style and our own way of speaking really, really quickly. The forums were huge. Now, as someone that has a big interest in SEO, normally you would never talk about forums anywhere near SEO because you wouldn't want links from forums. That kind of thing is quite dodgy. But actually, the forums for this were amazing because there's so many football forums that are really genuine and they're there for an actual reason, and people are having great conversations. And they were sharing this round, and it was just going crazy. And then the social conversations. So these were some of our favorites. I'll point out my absolute favorites. So this guy down here, Dominic, of course, so I think we'd asked him whether he'd submitted his details. And he said, of course, I'm thinking of putting it on my CV. I'm so proud of this achievement. We had wives messaging. We had everything, because people just literally, especially if they got to the end, they were so excited. Yeah, my husband is stuck on number 50 and he's driving me crazy. It was brilliant. The social side was just what we would have wanted. So how do you get gamification right? So this comes back to the research that we did, so thinking about the type of game. So the top type of game that we found people liked were knowledge-based games, closely followed by puzzle. That 53% block, there were loads of different types in there. They were all kind of your chance games like spinning wheels, or your hand-eye coordination of jumping over things and hitting the space bar, etc. And they were all much lower numbers. So for us, it really is about knowledge-based, puzzle, that kind of thing, getting people to think. Something else that we're just testing at the moment, now this is the first time I've shown anyone this, we've just built this. We worked with a team of psychologists, and we've built a personality tool for journalists. Now again, coming back to our SEO roots in the agency, journalists are people that we work with quite regularly, and for us it's really important that we understand their drivers and their motivations to try and make sure that we put the right story in front of them at the right time in the right way. So we came up with the idea of creating a personality quiz, and it's kind of based on Myers-Briggs from a psychology point of view. And this is really new. I think we started reaching it out about a week ago. And we're not going big on this. This isn't to try and get loads of coverage. What we want is we're being really specific, and we're targeting actual journalists and saying, come and take our test and find out which type of journalist you are. And there's 4 different profiles that come out the back of it. And with the psychology that's baked into it, they should at the end of it be like, yeah, that does sound like me, because it's kind of got that built in. What's amazing with this, though, so this is playing on that kind of idea that people want to know more about themselves, and it's kind of knowledge-based, but they're learning about themselves. We've probably had about 200 people complete this so far, so not huge numbers, but our conversion rate of people that have landed on this page and then gone on and done the quiz is 60%. I mean, I've never seen something so high before that's like quiz-based. But it's because we're being really targeted. So we're at a much lower scale than the 100,000, 140,000 of the game I just talked about. But it shows actually from an interest point of view. And for us, this is about learning about trends and being able to share this with the market, actually. So future talks for me will be able to try and take some of the data that we've learned from this and help our colleagues across the audience learn about how to speak better to journalists and how to gain their attention. But actually, this as a concept is really cool because people love to learn more about themselves. So that's another way of doing gamification. But games need to be part of an integrated digital strategy. Now, I've heard this so many times before. People have come up when we've got stands and, oh, my boss wants a game. And I was like, oh, I never like to hear that, because you have to start at the end bit. It's not, oh, I want a game. It's actually, this is what I'm looking to do for my strategy. I'm trying to drive leads. I'm trying to drive engagement, drive data. There's got to be a driver, and then a game might be the right answer, but it also might not be the right answer. Games can end up costing quite a bit of money, especially if you're building something from scratch. And in a perfect world, you probably are trying to do something from scratch or something more bespoke. If it's one of these off-the-shelf games, chances are it's going to be less engaging for the user because it's going to be something more common that they've seen before. So they need to be part of an integrated digital strategy. And we have seen so many brands throw away money on games that just fall flat. I've been in meetings before where we've been asked to come in, and I've gone and done my research beforehand, and then I've rocked up and said, oh, you've got a game on your website, and the team don't even know the game's there, and then it eventually transpires that someone said we should do a game, and they spent 100 grand on some game that didn't do anything for them. So it tends to be either that people are overselling or that they've just got excited and said we should have a game, and there wasn't really a strategy behind it. So I'll take you through the do's to get gamification right. So first of all, it's definitely considering your audience. Now, in our report, you'll see some audience data. We've talked about some of that today, the young being probably better than the older audiences, the different types of games that they might engage with. But really thinking about that audience and maybe speaking to some of your customers or the people that you'd want to attract to make sure that you understand, is this something that they'd be likely to go for? Doing competitor research, and that's really easy to do because you can literally start how I do before a meeting, put brand name and search game on Google, and you'll start to see, have they done any games before? And then if you find a game and you can find out when it happened, go back in your social feeds and try and find, did they get engagement? Did it look like they had a big peak in interest at that point? Just do your kind of delving, and if you've got competitors that you've got friends in, you can ask them, oh, you did that campaign a few years ago, was it any good? Because it's important to understand how others have succeeded or failed at this before jumping straight in on an idea. Conduct research and tests. So at the point that you're like, yeah, I think we do want to do this, and we've got an idea for a game, and this is what we're thinking of doing, try and find a way that you might be able to kind of research that a bit more or even test it. So I'll Find 50 game. We've done quite a few of those since, but what we tend to do is we start to make up some of the clues. We do that. Some of our designers even sketch them out, and we'll put them in front of people that should be the target audience and see if they can actually achieve them or not. One of the other games we did was one for the World Cup, and it was football players, but it was players of all time across all countries. So it was a huge pool of players that you might be picking from, and it was actually really, really hard. And some of them we put in front of kind of real die-hard football fans, and they were like, no, I can't get it. So it allowed us to kind of work out which ones were too hard to take out and how to kind of get that balance right. So you definitely want that competitive, and you want it to be difficult, but you don't want it to be too difficult. Think about motivation. What's their motivation for doing it? Now, with the 550 clubs, we had a £100 JD Sports voucher you could win at the end. That was not the motivation, though. I think when I emailed the guy to say he'd won, he was like, oh, I didn't even know there was a prize. He hadn't been playing it for the prize. He was playing it for the fun and the glory of the game. So thinking about that motivation and making sure that you're clear on what they need, what's the carrot you need to dangle. Is the game good enough on its own that they're just going to want to play it? Is it that at the end of it they get some kind of badge that makes them feel really good? Is there a big prize? What's the reason to play the game? Make it competitive, so leaderboards can be good and can work really well, or having an easy way to kind of share scores and using, for our game, WhatsApp was huge. We couldn't necessarily see the traffic coming from WhatsApp, but we knew that was going on from comments people were making. Like, they literally were creating their own WhatsApp groups and helping each other out and trying to kind of collectively do this. So find ways that you can integrate social in that way. Consider achievements. So if it is a long game, how can you make them feel good as they're going? So actually, with 50 to find, we had to kind of keep encouraging them and saying, well done, you're doing really well, etc. Other games we've done for clients, there's been prizes along the way so that they feel like they're doing really well. But just think about that motivation and how to drive them on throughout the game if it's going to be a longer form game. Think about tracking. So if you're spending money on this, we're going to want to know if it was working or not. So we use Google Tag Manager, and we literally tag up everything. We tag up wrong answers, because that can be quite fun and give a spin-off story that way. We tag up time that people are spending on things. Anything we can tag and find a way to track, we do, because we don't know if it's going to give us a little bit of nugget insight that we'll be able to use. So thinking about what the measures are, trying to, and especially if this is something you're pitching internally and you're pitching it to your boss, before you're even pitching it, think about what you're hoping to get from it. And I'll talk about some of the benefits in a minute. But try and lay those out and work out, how will I track that that's worked? Especially if you're engaging maybe a current audience, it's going to be harder to see an uplift in a new audience. How are you going to track their engagement? How are you going to know that you've had an effect that was worth spending this money on? Consider influencers. So we talked about influencers earlier today. How can you use influencers? And also, can you maybe speak to some of the influencers in your industry and ask them, do you like the sound of this game? Would you be happy to be behind it? I'm sure they'll say for a fee they will. But try and work out, do they think they're interested in it? And is it something that your shared demographic would like? Don't hang all of your hopes on just one outcome. So we'll talk through in a minute all the different benefits you can get. And I think it's important to try and aim for multiple benefits, because there's lots that you can get from gamification. So having just one thing, you are resting a lot on that. And it is something that it can fail. And I'll talk about that as well in a moment. Sense check with journalists. Now, if you are wanting this from a PR point of view, you definitely need to be talking to journalists before you've even built it. Ask them, do you think you'd cover this? But think about what the hook might be. So actually, our football game, the hook was the Premiership was about to start. There was a reason. But we've since had clients want to do games, and then they're a bit disappointed that the journalists don't want to pick it up, but there hasn't been enough of a hook. They might get the local journalists that are interested more in their brand, but the nationals won't take it. So think about, is there a hook? Is there something going on that you can put it to go with? Is there some research you could do? And you could say, our brand did this research and we found this about customers in the UK, and off the back of that we created a game to help engage them more, or whatever it may be, but something to give a reason as to why you've created this game. Also, just a note from the work we've been doing, a lot of the big, so like the Daily Mail, people like that, they will definitely publish games, but they want to publish the answers as well. So that's something that's quite important to know up front if it's going to be a quiz. And if you're working and you want to manage expectations of your boss or your clients, if you want that kind of coverage, they literally won't publish without publishing the answers at the same time, which seems a little ludicrous. But it's fine if you've got buy-in and you understand that from the early days. Consider if it's link-worthy. So if you are wanting links and SEO is important to you, why are they going to link to it? Can they embed it? Think about that as well. So we've created most of ours that you can embed as well, and that also gives us a link. But is it something that's worth them sending their traffic to? Is there a reason that they'd want the traffic to leave their website to come onto your game? Consider all devices. Now, it's hard on mobile sometimes to get games to work right. There's obviously some games work really, really well. I'll find 50 does work on a mobile. It's not the best experience. The desktop is better, but you do need to think about mobile because people will be wanting to play these, especially if they've seen it on social media. So make sure you've thought about that and you thought about that early into your plans to make sure it can work. Consider a series of games. Now this might sound a bit crazy, like I haven't even done one yet, why am I going to do more? But actually, we're doing this with South Western Railway at the moment. It was better for them to look at investing in a series of games because each game then therefore became cheaper. And after each game, we're learning something new about their audience and we're putting the learnings of that into the next game that we're doing. So think about it that way, and it might be the investment into the platform or the type of game that you want to use becomes easier to kind of take because you know you've got more to come out of it. It's not just one campaign. The don'ts. I covered this earlier, but it's a really important point to mention again. Do not make it sales focused. So you can have it as like an onboarding style game. So at the point that you've sold to them, you might have it that it's something to help them learn about your product, and that can be really cool. But don't make it sales focused at the outset. It needs to be, if it's to drive lead generation and engagement, it needs to just be fun and something your brand values match with as well as your customers' values. Don't make it too complicated because that will turn people off, but it is that fine balance. And don't data capture too early. So for us, it's really important to just not have that data capture until you're further down the process. We want them in, we want them engaged, and at that point, let's try and get them to hand over their data. So what can I expect to achieve? GDPR compliant data capture is definitely one of them. So out of all of our games, that is definitely an upshot of it, that we're generating data and we're getting people to agree. Obviously, they don't have to agree, but in the most part, because they're having fun, they do want to hear from your brand again. They're less likely to say no. It's not like when they're buying something and they think, oh, you're just going to keep trying to sell to me. It's like, oh, actually, I like this game. Yeah, do contact me again, especially if you've got this game. Engagement, so having that chance to have your brand in front of the customer for as long as it may be that they're playing the game. We do, so I think I've got some more screenshots of other games, but I can show some others later if anyone wants to have a look. We do try and make sure they are branded, so obviously our one wasn't because we weren't worried about our brand being in there. But having that brand recognition there is important, but you obviously also don't want it too plastered over it because you're trying to let them have fun. But it's all about that engagement and a shared experience from your brand with that customer. Increase social following. So we also always ask them that if they want tips or they want to ask questions about the game, we say, oh, well, follow us first and then we'll happily give you a tip or a hint. So trying to get that following to join onto your social channels is really good. The PR side of it, as I covered, but making sure you've got a hook. The links, so that will come off the back of PR, but then also looking at blogs and influencers and how else you can get links back to this game. It's finding that right audience though, and I think we now, before we'd even consider saying yes to a game with a customer, if they want it from a link building point of view, we'll always start with building out that list early doors and starting to have some conversations to say, if we were to create something like this, would you be interested in sharing it? And that feedback is valuable because sometimes they'll say, oh, we would, but more if it was like this, and then you can take that on board and use it. Traffic, so traffic in itself isn't always useful, but you can do things like remarket to that traffic, and it's good to kind of have that exposure to them with your brand, so that is another benefit. Insight into your audience, so like my example with our Your Inside Story, we're learning a bit about our customers, but it could be even more subtle than that. It might be you're a fashion brand and you create a quiz, and some of the questions are kind of about what celebrities are wearing at the moment. Now, if it was me answering that, I would really struggle because I'm terrible with my celeb knowledge, but then the brand would instantly know, okay, this person doesn't seem to be influenced by celebrities, so when we next send them email marketing, let's move them out of the celeb bucket where we tell them what the celebs are all wearing, and let's put them into a different bucket so that we're speaking to them about something they'll be interested in. So that's where you can start to get really clever with it. And a chance to change the narrative. So like I said earlier, we're working with Southwest Trains. Like, you often think of train companies as just, oh, my train's late again, and it's not fun communication. This is a really great reason to put something fun in front of your audience and to have fun with them and to have a communication that's not about the boring day-to-day if your brand can sometimes feel like that. And then it's just that awesome brand experience for your audience. Longevity as well. Now, it depends how you structure the game, and if there's a prize, there might be an end point. But then we tend to say that even if there's an end point, take all the T's and C's and the promotions off and just keep the game up there. As I said, 2 years later, we've still got people coming to our game. We're just quoting at the moment to do this for a company that have got a big price change coming. They're changing their whole structure of their pricing within their business. And that change isn't going to be that popular with their customers because it's going to mean they're probably paying more for what they used to pay less for. But we're looking at strategically putting a game in place at the same time and using that as part of the comms plan and using that to try and heighten the kind of understanding of everyone's different, and having these different price levels is really useful. And actually, it's something that they can then use longer term. Like, the game isn't specifically about this, it's just being used at the same time. And then it becomes part of a way of onboarding customers, learning a bit about them, etc. So there's definitely longevity, even if you do it as a campaign piece. But what next? So you do a game and you launch it. Well, we've got the funnel, so we know all the different parts it can fit into, and depending on how you've made that game and how you're outreaching it to your audience, you can cover off people sitting in all those different buckets, except for Seal the Deal. Definitely don't put it there. Then it's the email journey planning. So hold on, if we've got their data, what are we going to do with it? We should intro our brand properly, especially if it's the first time we've ever had contact with that user. So they've come across us, their friends told them to come and play this game, they've just played this game. They don't know who you are properly at that point. So we should be thinking about an email journey that we can plan off the back of it that says, thanks so much for playing our game. By the way, in case you wanted to know, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, here's some other cool things we've done, and actually looking at how you can get them to have a really good first experience with your brand following on from the game. Retargeting, mentioned it earlier, but it's a great way to use that data. You know that they're interested in whatever the topic of your game was, so if it's relevant, you might want to retarget them. But there are varying levels of success. So we did, and that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just something to note, really. So this one was the first one we did for Betfair, and it was horse races. And obviously horse racing is quite niche, and the names of horses are very random. So actually when you're trying to play it, you're literally saying out words and you're like, well, that could actually be the name of a horse, or it might not, who knows. But this actually, from a reach point of view and an engagement, was really low numbers, even though it was coming off the back of such a big brand with such a huge database, compared to, for example, our football one going from a standing start. But they were really happy with it because it did engage their audience. So I guess it's just a point to note that I'm not necessarily saying that games are always going to get you 140,000 plus people, especially if you're on an unknown brand. That's not necessarily going to happen, but that also might not necessarily be what you want to happen anyway. So it's just managing those expectations. Can it go wrong? It can. So you can go too niche, I think. And again, that's only wrong if your expectations were that you wanted it to go further. You can make it too hard and not engage people to want to complete it. So actually that Betfair one, I don't think many people did complete it because it was so hard. A friend of mine was a bookmaker and he couldn't even do it. And he spends his life looking at horses and he struggled. So getting that balance right is really important. Too expensive, you might spend too much money on it, and actually you think, whoa, actually it was really fun, but I don't think we got the ROI on that. So really thinking about that value, and where also, is it something that you can reuse and build into other things? We take games to events like today, so actually I've got the iPad over there, and you guys can play some of our games. So it's thinking, if you're a business where actually you go to events, can you make it as a game that can be on your stand? Could you have it in your reception when people are sitting waiting to see someone? There are lots of other ways that you could use the game so that your continual ROI is coming from it, especially if it costs money to put together. Not enough outreach, so if there isn't enough time to get it out there to journalists, then that might be a struggle and might be difficult. So making sure that you've got enough time, and if you're paying an agency to create something like this, remembering that that part really does take time, not only the actual outreach, but the bit before that of finding who are going to be the right journalists. There is a very good chance they're going to be different journalists to who you'd normally go to with press releases, because you're looking for people that are more likely to cover games and quizzes. Having a hook, but there being too much noise. So actually our second football one that we did for ourselves, we did the players one that I mentioned. And this one, the results were still really good considering we don't have a huge following, but I think we only reached maybe 40, 50,000 people, which compared to our first one, we were a bit like, oh, it wasn't as good. But the World Cup, there is so much noise. Like the Premiership's big, but the World Cup is so big. So trying to get a message out there. So it's just thinking about, if you are doing something at a point that there's lots going on, can you be sure you're going to be able to cut through that noise correctly? Or missing your hook due to there being delays. So we've had this with a couple of clients before where they really wanted to launch at a certain point because something was happening, but then they've had internal delays with sign-off, etc. So being really clear at the outset, if you're launching this game and you've got a hook and there's a reason for it, then everyone needs to be aligned and needs to know we must be ready for this point, because otherwise we'll miss the hook and we won't get the same impact. So I mentioned earlier, obviously, the SEO side of things. So these were some slides that I did at Brighton SEO earlier this year, talking about the link builder's call of duty. So how you might use this for link building and what would be the plan to use it in that way. So these are just kind of the steps that we'd take. So you'd have done this way before, but like a week before launch, you're going to check all those people that you found. Are they still working where they were working? Are they still active on social? Are they the right people that you're going to contact? Then maybe 5 days till launch, you're going to send your sneak peek and start a social countdown. So that sneak peek needs to get them excited. 3 days to launch, start following up if you haven't heard back. Did you see what I sent? Did you like it? How did you get on with it? Did you get the answers? That kind of thing, to try and get them engaged. 1 day to launch, you need to make sure you have got some kind of agreed coverage confirmed so that you've got someone to help you launch this. And then launch day, you're going to send a full press release to more people now. So you've kind of done your select people that you really think are going to be engaged. You're going to send your full press release at this point. If anyone's not done anything with the press before, we've got a download guide /journalist here that talks you through how to do a press release. Jo, that works in our team, is an ex-journalist, so she knows exactly what they're looking for. Launch day, you're going to get social. We want this all over social media. If anyone's talking to you, make sure you're talking back. You need to start that engagement. 1 day post-launch, go back to any targets that haven't responded to you, so especially those really hot ones. At this point, you might already have some results, or you might have got covered somewhere else. So go and follow up with them and mention to them that you're still really interested in them covering it and that you think it would be right for their audience. 2 days post-launch, depending on the topic, you might want to look at forums, see if there's any way to start some conversations with relevant people. Obviously, that worked well in the sporting area. It might not work well in all areas, so it's just something to think about. 3 days post-launch, you might do a follow-up press release with some stats. You might have had loads of people playing it, and you might have something interesting you can say about that. It might be 70% of people complete this in 3 minutes. Can you do it too? That kind of thing to hook the journalist in. Think about local. So as a business, even if you're a worldwide business, think about the local opportunity. It might be that your local press to where your office is might want to cover it. So think about that. That's another opportunity for links. Challenge influencers. Now, we did this, and I will say it didn't work for us, but I still think it's a good idea, so I always share it. But with the football one, we created some graphics, and we put influencers. So we put like Gary Lineker's face on it, and it was like, we challenge you to see if you can find 50, for example. It didn't work because I think we probably went too big with some of our influencers, so we weren't able to cut through the noise of their feed. But I do think it's a good idea, and depending on what type of influencers you've got in your area, it might well work. Or it's just a case of kind of going to an engaged audience and trying to challenge them. Check your progress. You're going to be doing this before then, but if you haven't, you definitely should be at this point. Looking at Google Analytics to see what kind of data you've got coming through. You'll have set up Google Alerts, hopefully, at the start, so you'll be seeing if anyone covers you. Thinking about Majestic SEO will help you go and see all the links that you've got coming back. And then reflect, tweak, and repeat. So the nice thing with this is if you've got a hook, there might be more time sensitivity around it, but actually the ongoing bit of the game, all the while, if you've got a prize draw coming, whatever it may be, you can still keep talking to people about it. So you've got time. It's not necessarily urgent day one to get the results. A couple of games we've done, so the Find 50, if anyone missed taking a photo of that and wants to go and play it, that's definitely the easier one of the football ones. That's the World Cup one. Sweets one, anyone with a sweet tooth, definitely a bit of fun. That's all different kind of old style sweets. Any questions? Oh, we've got questions.
It's okay.
I'm going to have a sip of drink while I've got a moment.
Yeah, thank you. That was great, and I love your presentation. It looks awesome.
Thank you. That's our awesome design team, not me. But
just about the next steps, really. You mentioned like email marketing strategies where you introduce more about brand values. But at what point do you start mentioning the product or the sale or best strategies to then actually convert these people into buyers? Is it just email or?
I think it depends. So hopefully through doing the game, you'll have been able to segment out who were your already current customers, and then so you've got your pool of these are new people that we don't think we've ever spoken to before. So then I think it's starting with a softer brand message of thanks for playing, this is who we are. Try and get them to follow you on social as well. If you love playing the game, come and find us on Facebook or wherever. And then I think it's just something you can gradually do over the coming weeks, and but you can measure that engagement and tweak it as required. So I think I would see kind of, if on the second email you mention a product, see what kind of click-through rates you get. You might be like, oh, maybe we'll step back and we'll do something more as a helpful article as the next thing. And again, it depends if it's B2B or B2C. But I think it's trial and error at that point, depending on your brand and the audience, and seeing what works, and you can kind of test that. And that's the nice thing with email journeys. You can quite easily go and say, oh, if that didn't work, we'll take this bit out and put this in instead and see if that works any better. And especially if you've got the longevity of the game, you've got kind of time to see what's working and tweak it as it goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and do you ever do any other retargeting other than email after that?
Yeah, so we would make sure we were running ads as well to try and retarget. We'd be kind of trying to get them in on social media. And that's probably off the back of the game what we'd be doing. Then if you've obviously got another game you do in the future, then they're a great audience to go straight back to if you've not been able to win them as a customer at that point, or to try and share anything else that's kind of more fun and more brand building if they're not ready to move into being a customer. But I think email is probably the easiest route at that point, because that's kind of what they've given you. And obviously if you can move them over in any other way, then it's awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions over here?
Sure. Hiya. Basically, the question is more to do with if I were to hire your company, per se, to help out with my startup, what sort of technologies do you sort of use, stuff like APIs to integrate? For instance, if I needed to create a game just to raise awareness for my new brand, are there specific technologies that you use that can be integrated into my system, or is it something that you basically just build?
So we would design and build from scratch. So our process normally is starting at the end point of what it is you're looking to achieve, and then working back to try and come up with the strategy and the idea and doing all that research. And then when we're all really comfortable with that, we'll be starting to work out technically how we're going to build it. And if you've got systems that you want to integrate with, then we can definitely do that. So quite a lot of our games go into Salesforce, so they send the data straight in and can include things like the scores that they got, etc. The idea around you could segment data, we can use any answers that they've got and pass that through to things like Salesforce or other systems. The idea is you want this to be as easy to use and then take on further as possible. We've also, some of our games, we've made them content manageable to make it easy for clients to kind of run one version and then run the next version. So it all depends what it is, how we're doing it. But yeah, all of that's kind of open to be decided in that initial discovery phase.
Okay, and in terms of budget, is every game basically tailored to specific budgets, or is there certain sort of packages that you guys work with?
It really depends. So the least we've been able to do a game for that's like a proper bespoke thing, because the thing is you can use ideas from this on social media. You can go and like, people are doing it all the time now on Instagram stories, they're putting quizzes and stuff, and that's engaging, and that's a really good first dabble into this. So that kind of stuff you guys can just go and do, and you might want some help with. But for something where we've created bespoke, probably the lowest price we've been able to do it for is like kind of $5,000, but going up to like 20, 30, and further on from there, depends how complicated it is and how else it can be used. We also, if it's something that we think we can reuse, then we'll take on some of the cost ourselves if the client's happy to just use it on a license basis. So that's another way we can look at it, and that makes it cheaper for the client, but it gives us something we can resell. So those Find 50 games, obviously we've done lots of those, which is why that's actually quite a cheap product for us to be able to deliver now, because we've done the work initially. So yeah, does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions? And I'll be sure to tell our design team how much you guys like the slides, because they are absolutely beautiful. Just on screen there, if anyone wants to take a photo, /antidote gets you the research paper, and /digimarcon gets you all the slides from today. And thank you. I hope everyone found that useful, and I'll be here the rest of today and tomorrow if you've got any questions. So thank you ever so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.